Ik ga het even zonder klikken doen, dus ik loop af en toe even terug naar mijn laptop. Dank jullie wel dat jullie deze sessie hebben uitgekozen. Ik ga wat vertellen over mijn reis naar cybersecurity. In combinatie met een aantal onderwerpen waar ik veel mee bezig ben. AI, cybersecurity, al wat langer mee bezig. Heel specifiek, ja, ik ga ook NIS2 benoemen. Vooral even richten op wat updates. Ik ga ervan uit dat iedereen de basis al kent. Oh, apologies. I'm automatically starting in Dutch. Are any non-Dutch speakers here? Hands, please. Yes, okay, sorry. Apologies for that. Thank you, very sharp colleague as always. Very quickly, thank you for choosing this talk. My name is Pieter Jansen. I will share a bit of my journey in cybersecurity and talk about some topics I'm very passionate about, which is AI, cybersecurity, combination thereof. I will touch a little bit on the NIS2 regulation. I'm sure you'll get beaten to death by the regulation in this hall. I'll only focus on some of the updates that I've seen and how AI specifically applies to that. So, briefly about my background, I've been in ethical hacking since I was around 15. I'm 42 now, so I've been around in this industry. Before we called it cybersecurity for a longer time. I'm saying ethical, we didn't use that term back then. We had black hat, white hat, but ethical seems to be the standard everybody decided on. I founded a cybersecurity company, and I did it because I had a lot of tools I created for capture the flag competitions, which I participated in together with friends. And I've kind of built a SaaS platform using that. And I went to some of my friends, some clients from consulting business, and I asked them, like, hey, is this something you would like to pay for? Well, most of them said, yes, that's super interesting. So that's kind of how I started my startup. Fast forward to 2022, Darktrace acquired my startup. Today I'm still there, I'm still having fun. And at Darktrace I'm responsible for innovation. So I work with very bright-minded people developing proof of concepts for new technologies, sometimes related to our products, sometimes something totally different, just to see what we can do with that area. I would like to talk to you first, maybe briefly, who doesn't know Darktrace yet? Then I need to speak with marketing, because apparently we send emails to everyone. We'll take care of that. We are with 2,300 employees. That's kind of the static count, but we're still hiring a lot of people every week. And we are now close to 10,000 clients. This is the official number. And what I really love about working with these clients, so when I was still a startup, we didn't have thousands of clients. We had a bit lower number towards the hundreds. But Darktrace has clients in any sector, almost every country you can think of. So for me, now being part of Darktrace, it's super fun to take new technology and kind of go through the list of clients and kind of see, okay, I would like to speak with this one, and this one, and then speak about my product and see how that applies to them. And not from a commercial, pushy background, no, it's really about talking about innovation and how we can basically solve the problems of tomorrow. So briefly, one of the topics I've been working on with my colleagues in the past 5-6 years is kind of tracking the developments in what we call the aggressive autonomous agents. I'll dig a bit into a definition of that later on. Using NIS2 as kind of the catalyst to make us as an industry more secure, and then looking at AI applications to kind of address this modern threat. So I'll go quickly through these slides because they're kind of theoretic to introduce the topic. So if you look at what does, how do you define these AAA threats, as we call them? Agents are pieces of technology that perform a specific task. If you look at autonomous agents, these are able to follow a path of decisions and then can conclude we're not getting the reward we were supposed to get. So the agent tracks back to make a different decision where they made a decision before. So now we have the the autonomous agents. If you look at aggressive, then we're speaking about purpose. So what does the agent try to achieve? Is it trying to create active damage within organizations? So if you look at some examples, we actually had in the 80s the Morris worm. Who's old enough to know the Morris worm? I believe it's 1983 or 1984 when it was released. I'm not old enough to remember that. But basically, it was a computer virus that was accidentally released to what we had called the internet back then, or we didn't call the internet back then. And it was an engineer that just wanted to try how fast such a thing would propagate, and surprise, it propagates very, very fast. You can find the floppy disk still in a US museum containing the original virus. That was kind of not necessarily aggressive yet, because it only had a purpose of spreading, not causing damage. Who's old enough to remember the I love you virus? There's more hands, yeah. I remember getting emails saying, I love you, and then tricking you to click on the attachment. That was kind of one of the early Outlook exploits that was used in the wild. Now, if you go further, we have got WannaCry. I'm sure everybody here knows WannaCry. And some of the new wiper worms. I think the wiper worms are a good example of kind of statically programmed aggressive autonomous agents. Somebody has predefined what it should do, and it then tries to do that in an autonomous fashion to create as much damage as possible. So each of these examples that we've seen so far have their own tactics. It's a bit too small on the big screen, but just as an illustration, Stuxnet uses a specific set of tactics from the MITRE attack framework to come up with a specific attack plan. If you can also see that for the banking malware, kind of a different focus, but already a bit polymorphic or versatile in terms of what kind of login screen it does present to the end user. Drydex, for example, had support for around 120 different UK banks. So if you had the infection, depending on which bank you would go to, you would get that login screen from that fake piece of software. So that is a bit dynamic already, but again, it is pre-programmed, it's static. So you could call it AI, artificial intelligence, but not machine learning or any other advanced techniques that were used there. So we've seen that these kind of old school attacks still, they use specific set of tactics from the landscape, but they do implement multiple stages from the kill chain to basically automate as much as possible. Most of these have it automated from left to right, where there's not a manual process of step required in order to advance to the next step. So looking a bit at the future, this is kind of the evolution tree that we came up with around 4 years ago, and what we expect in terms of the two paths this could evolve into, and maybe it is happening in parallel. If you look at the kind of a natural evolution of the aggressive autonomous agents, I often say attacker tactics only change when they stop working, because why should they invest if they can still make people click on links? If people still don't patch their systems, there's no need for that. So these agents will evolve when people start patching their security, making it better, when we adopt two-factor in most places. It's still good enough in most cases. So the expansion is more covering more MITRE tactics and growing kind of through an evolution. Another path that we might see, and we've seen some signs of it already, is kind of a next generation version of these AAA threats. I update this deck every few months with some of the latest insights based on things we've seen in the Dark Race SOC, what we've seen, what other companies are reporting about. And especially if you look at machine learning, incorporation of that, incorporation of generative AI, we have observed already generative AI-powered email threats, for example. We've published about it as Dark Race. You can find it in our research center, where we, for example, see a shift from attachments and links in emails to get people to get them infected, a switch towards linguistically correct emails to kind of entice you into a response and start up a conversation in kind of a trusted fashion. So this might already be cooked up in a lab. It might surprise us one day, but it is, I think, something we need to keep an eye on. And I think if we took the rest of the day and we had a quiet room, we could probably come up with some kind of nightmare malware already with all the knowledge present in this room, just by combining existing technologies. So if we can, we don't have the incentive, but others also might have that incentive. So in one way, I'm surprised it's not here today, because there are some bright researchers in this room also who could easily create this. Why haven't we seen it yet? And I think it is because they don't need it yet, because the attacker tactics will only change when they stop working. What I do see in terms of influence of AI, I kind of drafted this kind of, it might have some kind of, it looks a bit like a hype cycle. It is not, it does not have anything to do with Gartner. But if you look at the trends we've seen in cybersecurity, phishing, that's so old school, it's still happening, but it's kind of commoditized in terms of the tactics used. If you look at ransomware as a service, we've seen that kind of the marketplaces where you can order your customized ransomware. we've seen last year quite a lot of activity around MFA fatigue, so pushing people to kind of over the edge when they say after your two-factor app keeps pinging you, and after the 30 times you say, okay, just log in. Well, that's when you gave an attacker access. We've seen that quite a lot in the past years. But if you look at popularity, what I think will happen with AI, when open source tools, standardized AI services are available to the wider public, you will see a boost, kind of an AI push to the existing attacks that we've seen for years will now kind of get steroids in a way. Partial reason for that is sometimes a lack of security checking at AI service providers. There was, I think it was Black Cat that had released kind of a testing malware in a sandbox. It was observed in the wild, which did a callback as soon as it was running on a machine. It did a callback to an AI-powered service in a public cloud and requested, okay, based on the context, the environment variables of this machine, which commands should I run to make myself persistent on this machine? And it looked very playful, like a first experiment, but I think it's something we'll see more of. That's the first part. Let's move quickly to NIS2, and I promise to go quicker across this. Let's do a show of hands. NIS2, who knows what NIS2 is? That's good. So it's kind of 50-50. It's the new European directive, and if you are falling under the NIS2 regulation and it's a surprise to you, then you probably already have a problem because NIS1 also applied to most of you already. A lot of people are waiting for NIS2 to tell them what they need to do. Well, look at NIS1 and just tweak some things because that's all we know for now. So the process is a bit, from a security company perspective and from a CISO perspective, it's a bit annoying. Because as we do in Europe, we draft something on a European scale, then every member country needs to implement it on a local level. In terms of creating an equal kind of digital market in Europe, this can be done in this process, but it's not happening right now, in my humble opinion. So NIS2 applies to specific sectors, so there's an expansion in scope of sectors that are falling under the new directive. And very quickly, there's some good optimizations happening. There will be exceptions for smaller enterprises, which is good. One thing on the exception, the NIS2 directive goes very strong on supply chain security. So if you as a company do not fall under the NIS2 regulation because you're not on the list of markets, but you're supplying to companies who are in that market, you still have to comply because your clients will tell you need to comply, otherwise you'll lose business. Another thing I find very interesting is the response times. They're probably going to be decreased. You need to respond quicker as soon as you notice something is wrong. And you need to alert the authorities for your specific sector or country in case something happens. And you need to have a full report within 72 hours. I think it's a good move that we have these strict kind of requirements, but it's also a challenge, I think, in a market which is highly dominated by a big problem, that a lack of shortage of good people. Now, looking very closely, it is supposed to harmonize the different regulations within the countries. I think some of that is happening, but the main problem in my home country, the Netherlands, is they've delayed it a couple of times. And what companies need is a reliable government. And the internet consultation has been postponed. It's actually started last week. But what they published is still kind of a framework law. It still doesn't provide us any insights. So we're not waiting for that, of course. We're looking at what others are doing. Other countries are moving farther, but I think the Netherlands is so far the only one that said we're not going to make the deadline. They now have published a scheme. But there's one country which actually was the first and rightfully should be proud to do so. Anyone know which country has already fully implemented it? You can shout names. Belgium indeed, yeah, that's correct. And it's amazing. I was speaking with members of parliament in the Netherlands on Monday. And I told them, why bother? Look at what our neighbors already have published and do a smart copy-paste, because it wouldn't make sense. It strengthens our joint economies in that sense. So, looking a bit further, AI in cybersecurity, when you tell your customers, when you tell on these shows that you do AI, then the first question we've gotten, if we would do it like 5 years ago, the first question was, why do I need AI in cybersecurity? And in our kind of playbook for these events, we had frequently asked questions. We knew exactly which questions were coming, so we had a good response. Now, if you look at the questions we're getting today, is when you say you're doing AI, then the response is, well, everybody does AI. How is your AI different? Darktrace is essentially an AI company that started with cybersecurity as the main use case, and that was so successful that they decided to focus on cybersecurity only. So if you look at different types of AI that are being used in this industry, there are technologies that are using known attack data of historic attacks, looking at what the characteristics of those attacks were, basically supervised machine learning, knowing what the good data was, what the bad data was, then learning the algorithms what to look for. So we're basically, if you use those techniques, you are looking to identify attacks that it has seen before. So basically blocking known attacks. You need a lot of data for that. So that in this space, it is kind of a race who has the most data. I think Microsoft is winning that if you look at how advanced they are in terms of these algorithms. And it's an interesting battle. CrowdStrike also a big player in using machine learning on data. Now we see that in the past year, most vendors in security added a generative AI component on top of their security solution. I think it's good that they think about it, think about getting more value out of the data. But there's also some inherent risks. I'll dig a bit into some of the risks of AI later. Now, very briefly on Darktrace in specific, we have developed self-learning AI. So what it means is that every Darktrace product works from the same principle. We look at what is normal to you as an organization, how your network traffic normally goes, what your cloud resource use normally looks like, how your OT devices communicate, mobile devices, anything, what your attack service looks like from an outside. So when we've learned what is normal, we can trigger on anything that is abnormal. So if we've established that you normally communicate in a certain tone with your CEO, we know exactly when someone is trying to spoof that CEO because it's out of character or maybe a different language. So it's not using data from known attacks. Now it's really focusing on what is normal to the business and then kind of expanding on that. And this allows us to pick up things. If you look at Log4j, when Log4j announced they had a vulnerability, or actually the internet knew it before it was announced in the project, a lot of companies needed to start patching and finding out where it is. Within Darktrace, we know that a log server should never communicate to the outside because it's never done that before. So if due to a Log4j exploit it suddenly starts doing that, we block that. It's not normal. You can only do what you're normally allowed to do. So that's kind of the power of the principle of using self-learning AI. You need a protective skin, like your firewalls, etc. But there's a lot of things these devices don't block, especially when there are new attacks that nobody has ever seen before. So when you're speaking with vendors on this show, when you're speaking with us, these are some of the questions you should ask. What kind of training data has been used for their algorithms, for example? We've seen a lot of issues with alignment, with bias in various public algorithms. There's a big problem happening right now with Google's AI. If you look at the Google search examples where AI is adding advice based on internet data or people on Reddit trolling other people, but it's presenting it as new, as something factual. So it's all about learning what went into the algorithms, whether they source their algorithms. The European AI Act will already help a lot with protecting against those challenges, but it will be interesting to see. So ask these questions, and our colleagues can also support you in answering some of these questions. I've got them on the slides as well. But let's quickly go into the generative AI part. We have seen that, and we did a questionnaire amongst our customers. We've asked them, do you have a policy on the use of generative AI, such as ChatGPT or others? Most of them did not have a policy. We looked at the data, and we can see network traffic. So we see that 74% of the customers actually has traffic to all of these services. So the organizations were using it already. There was no policy in place. So what we did for those customers, or we do it for all customers, we deployed these AI models to detect that behavior and allow the CISOs to kind of set the policy to say, yes, block that traffic, and educate users on the risk of that, kind of redirect them to security awareness if needed. So looking at the risks of using generative AI on top of your security solution. And yes, we are also using generative AI in our products. We have been using that since 2018 within Darktrace, since 2016 within my startup. If you look at what kind of data you put in there, we have trained it with our own security operations center data. So no customer data went into that. It's an important question to ask because there might still be knowledge hidden in there coming from a customer if you are using it, training it with the wrong data. A big issue I've seen is confirmation bias. All of you have probably worked with ChatGPT. The way you ask the question kind of influences the outcome. There's bias in your question, you will definitely get that back in your answer. So if you take this example, a security analyst will ask, okay, this kind of piece of logging with a bit of context, is this malicious? Get a long response. Conclusion is disconnect the device because it might be malicious. If a security analyst would do this and would blindly follow this advice, there could be downtime. It could be an important transaction that can now no longer be executed. If you look at it from an IT sysadmin's perspective, whose sole goal is to keep systems running as long as possible, you ask a different question. And in this example, you can see that, is this legitimate? Well, it might be bad, but please check the logs and verify. If this was a real infection, then the company could have been ransomed already if the analyst wouldn't take further action in terms of blocking things. So it's all about using the right AI for the right job. So I'm speeding up a bit because of time. One really nice thing that is available is called a project called AutoGPT, an open source project, which is basically a wrapper around ChatGPT. And somebody, one of my colleagues created a social engineering simulator with that tool, and you can basically give it a goal. It will then start up an OpenAI session, a ChatGPT session. It will kind of ask to create a plan for achieving that goal. And then for every step, it will spin up a new agent to work on steps of that goal. It is really easy to make this. So we've created an example. You kind of need to try social engineering, create a list of Darktrace employees using LinkedIn, gather context, and draft an email. And a few minutes later, it presented this. It found Marcus Fowler, one of my colleagues. He is CEO of Darktrace Federal, quite a high position in the business. So the AI understood that we need to target someone important if we want to achieve our goal. And it also found out who the colleagues are based on LinkedIn interactions. So, and this is just using a publicly available tool. It then wanted to set up a domain, a fake domain, which is pretty similar to our domain. At this point, we stop it, of course, but this is as easy as it gets with today's open source tools. I've already spoke a bit about the Darktrace platform. We've launched our active AI platform, and this is kind of visualizing everything that's in that platform a couple of months ago. What is good to remember for this is that every part you'll see here, and attack service management used to be my small startup, now fully integrated into Darktrace. But everything you see here is based on self-learning AI. So it's about understanding you. It doesn't matter for us to study the attackers. Everybody's doing that. We study our clients to make sure we know exactly what is normal to them and what is abnormal. In closing, the next gen, so the right pathway in the potential futures of AAA threats, I think it is more than ever on the horizon, given the free availability of a lot of tools. As I said, AI will supercharge attacks. We've seen it in email traffic. I gave you the example what you can do with open source tooling already today. I believe the NIS2 directive framework will give security a boost, the security industry, security budgets for the CISOs, just as GDPR has done that. my kids go to sports clubs, and even they know about GDPR. It's so ingrained into our daily life now that everybody's much more privacy aware. So NIS2 will start smaller with a smaller focus, but I think due to the supply chain effect, it will affect all of us in, I think within a year as soon as it's implemented, and we might see some delays in the deadlines there. I also believe that due to the nature of these more advanced and autonomous attacks, you should no longer try to defend with humans alone. They should be supercharged. So I don't believe AI will replace humans, it will make them stronger, it will augment them. If you're worried about AI replacing your job, you should be worried about people that are using AI replacing your job. So the NIS2 implementation, in most countries, there's still a chance of influencing it locally. So if you have concerns about your specific industry, speak with your lawmakers. In the Netherlands, you can do that actually as of last week. I think it lasts for another 2 weeks. You can just reply on the form and tell them what you think about it, how it should be changed. And everything will be publicly discussed, and you can even be invited to Parliament to give your opinion supporting that. There's a lot of hype around AI, and we've seen similar kind of almost AI bubbles in the 60s, in the 80s, the 90s. Some of you might remember expert system technology. It would be the future for medicine. Doctors would no longer give you advice. We just use the expert system, which was trained on years of work of doctors, and it will give you the right answer. It was not adopted because the systems just simply didn't work that well. I think this AI, these were called AI winters in kind of the community. I think we're not in a new AI winter. I think this is really something that has changed so much already in our daily lives, and especially in the cybersecurity domain, it will have an even bigger impact, I think, compared to other domains. With that, that's actually my last slide. I think went through it quite quickly. Thank you for your collective thinking power, and if you have any questions, I'll be here the rest of the day and tomorrow. So thank you very much.